Good morning. We are at the top of Daf Kuf Yud Gimel. Today's Daf is Zevachim Kuf Yud Gimel 113. We are at the beginning of the Gemara, but before I jump into the Gemara, I want to raise a question that Kenneth had asked. I think at this point a few weeks ago. I apologize for not remembering exactly how long, about whether or not in the process of skinning an animal, they could cook the animal before the animal, for example, an ola, before the animal ends up being sacrificed, because that might help the skinning process. Well, one of the items that we just dealt with in our Mishnah indirectly addresses this, because we are told in the Mishnah that there is a rule of what is the rule? The rule is of a good smell, reach nichoach, and Rashi explains that what that means is that the animal is not cooked before it goes on the altar. And so as a result, the answer to the question is that no, you're not allowed to do that. And this is the location where we learn that that is in fact the case. It turns out that it might have been indirectly touched on earlier, but I didn't remember it. But this is the explicit location where it specifically notes the fact that you need to have it first cooked only when it goes on the altar. So that was something that we had touched on earlier, and so I thought it was worth mentioning.
Where is that Rashi?
I'm trying to find it. I remember doing it. Maybe I'll try and touch on it and find it, and I'll send it around in the WhatsApp chat because I'm not finding it. No, here it is. It's actually on Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. It's the last word on the fourth line of Rashi. Reach nichoach. Amrinam beperek Beis Shammai, as we learned earlier in Perek Beis Shammai, Daf Mem Vav Amud Bet, l'shem shisha dvarim hazevach nizbach. That you need to have six different intentions when you sacrifice the sacrifices. L'shem reyach, and that one of those is for its smell. And la'afuke averim evarim shitzalan v'ha'alan, which is coming to exclude limbs that have already been fried or roasted before and then bringing them up. She'ein bahem mishum reyach nichoch, because as a result, you already had the reyach, and so as a result, you're not bringing it up for a reyach nichoch any longer because it already had the reyach. So that's the Rashi that I was referring to. Again, not explicit in the Gemara, but that's the way Rashi understands it. And so as a result, that would say that you would not be allowed to cook something before it goes up on the altar, because when you put it up on the altar, you're supposed to have the intention that doing so is creating a nice smell. Now, of course, in the end, I believe we say that don't have any intentions, that, yes, you're supposed to have these intentions, but it's so complicated that you're better off just not doing it with the idea that you're supposed to have whatever intentions you're supposed to have. But in any event, the bottom line is that here we have that the idea of reach nichoach applies, and that means that specifically we're not supposed to have cooked it ahead of time.
Are you
Okay.
going to send that later? I'm not finding it. You're going to send it.
It's on Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. It's the first narrow line of Rashi on the right hand side of the page. I'm not planning to
Oh,
send it around later because it's right there. Okay, so now we go to the Gemara, and we go back to the very beginning. This is one of the longest Mishnayos that I remember seeing in the text of the Gemara. And we began our Mishnah by noting that if you have a para aduma, which is referred to as a paras chatas, and you burn it in order to create the ashes for the para aduma mixture, you're going and you burn it outside its proper location. And what we said was what the words that were used in the Mishnah were shisrafa chutz megita, that you burned it outside of gita. And Rashi explained that gita was a language of a vat, and meaning it was a deep place, it's a pit. And so you burned it outside of that pit. And so the question is, what exactly does that mean? For example, if you burn it like a foot outside of the pit, is that outside the pit? If you burn it, what's the definition? So let's take a look. So Amaresh Lakish, so my chutz migita, as the Gemara opens. So
Where is
Amaresh
this?
Lakish chutz mimakom abadukla. It's you do the burning outside of the place that was checked for it. And Rashi explains, Mikmokom habadakla. Now, first Rashi on the Gemara, it's 10 lines down in the narrow lines of Rashi. Mimakom habadakla. Keep a finger on Rashi because we'll be doing a bunch right now. Mimakom habadakla. L'shochta, the place that was set aside, that was checked in order to slaughter it. Sham, there. She'ein tachteha kever hatahom. That you know for certain that there is no deep burial ground there, and as a result, there's no chance of it becoming tummy. Amar lo Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says back to him, Valo kol eretz Yisrael bidukahi. The entire Israel was checked. And we will see exactly what that means and what the machlokas is between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan shortly. So Ella Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan offers an alternative answer. Kagon shishchata lifnim min chomas Yerushalayim. It's where you slaughtered it within the walls of Yerushalayim. Lifnim min achoma. Take a look at Rashi. 2 lines down from where we ended. Livnim min achoma, shel Yerushalayim, inside the walls of Jerusalem. Diksiv ba behotziosa, because the key element is when it says in Parshas Chukas, the rules associated with the burning of the para aduma. It says that you take it out. So taking it out means outside the walls of Yerushalayim, outside the camp. And so as a result, that if you do it inside, you're doing it in the wrong place. But one second, why doesn't Rabbi Yochanan just say that you slaughtered it outside of Yerushalayim, just not opposite the entrance to the Kodesh HaKodeshim, that he suggests the Amar of Ada bar Ahava shchata shelo keneged haPesach pesula. The entrance to the Kodesh HaKodeshim faced east. And so if you were on the east side of Yerushalayim, looking towards Yerushalayim, you would see the opening of the Kodesh HaKodeshim. And so that's where you were supposed to slaughter the animal, according to Rav Ada bar Ahava. And if you don't do it there, psula, it's going to be puzzle. Shnei amar, v'shachat v'hizah, because there's a juxtaposition of the word v'shachat and v'hizah. Although they're not actually right next to each other, it says, where is that from? This is from Bamidbar, Parak Yutet, Pasuk Gimel and Pasuk Dalid. Pasuk Gimel ends V'shachat osa lefanav, and Pasuk Dalid says V'lakach Elazar hakohen midamam be'etzba'o v'hiza el nochach el pnei oel moed. So, based on the fact that the hizah, the sprinkling, clearly is intended to be opposite the opening or towards the opening of the oel moed. So therefore, we're going to say that the shechita, the slaughtering, also should be in that same location. As the Gemara, back into the Gemara says puts it explicitly. Mahazah keneged Pesach, just as the sprinkling needs to be opposite the front door of the opening of the Beis Hamikdash of the Kodesh. Av shchitasa keneged Pesach. So too, the slaughtering needs to be in front of it. V'chitema delo makish. And if you want to say that Rabbi Yochanan doesn't make this connection and doesn't agree with Rav Ada bar Ahava, v'ha'itmar, we have the following statement that shows that he does. So we'll skip the parenthetical and we'll continue with srafa shelo keneged hapesach. If you burn the para aduma, and the same thing would apply to shechting it. Rabbi Yochanan Amar psula, it's puzzle. Rabbi Oshia Amar kshera, and Rabbi Oshia says it's kosher. Rabbi Yochanan Amar psula, again the Rabbi Yochanan that we are talking about, and we were asking what his opinion is in this case because he says this saraf behiza, so he explicitly makes this juxtaposition a lesson, and Rashi puts it nicely. V'saraf behiza. Basar vehaza, samach v'saraf. Right next to hazah is also the saraf. So the point is that you have those two words very adjacent to one another. And so as a result, I mean, it's pasuk hey. So we have the same kind of connection that we had with respect to v'shachat, we have between v'hizah and v'saraf. And clearly Rabbi Yochanan learns that. So presumably he learns also the other connection. Rabbi Oshia Amar b'skshera, and Rabbi Oshia says no, it's kosher because it says al pirsha yisrof, that with its dung it shall be burned. And so what does that mean? That it shall well, we'll use a pun associated with pirsha. Makom sheporeshes lemisa shamte sreifasa. Animals, after they are slaughtered, they will often have death throngs and threshing around, and as a result, it's not a specific space that he has to be burned, but rather an aggregate place. But the bottom line is that was Rabbi Oshia's position. Rabbi Yochanan's position was clear that there's a juxtaposition between saraf v'hizah, and similarly, there would be one between hizah and shchita. And so as a result, it's clear that Rabbi Yochanan would say that if you slaughtered the cow not opposite the entrance to the Beis Hamikdash, it would not be a kosher shchita for the para aduma. And so why did he say instead that that the case of the non-kosher slaughtering was when you slaughtered it inside the city of Yerushalayim? So so they answered, Lo mi bai kamar. Now the point is he's giving us an extra comment. It's not necessary to say that you're not allowed to do it not opposite the entrance to the Beis Hamikdash. But more than that, lo mi bai chutz lechoma. Of course you can't do it. It's not necessary to say that you can't do it outside the wall where you're not able to see the opening. Derechuke rachkaka, because that's far away. Ela afilu lifnim min hachoma. But maybe you would say that within the walls it would be okay. De karuve karava, because you're so close to the Beis Hamikdash that maybe it would be okay even if you can't see the entrance. Ve'ema tiskasher. Maybe we'll say that will be okay. So kamash malan. That's why Rabbi Yochanan specifically tells us that the prohibition of burning the para aduma outside of its pit is coming to exclude the possibility of burning it in Yerushalayim, because I might have thought that burning it in Yerushalayim would be okay, even though not in the sight line of the opening of the Beis Hamikdash would not be okay. So maybe it would be okay because it's so close. So that's why Rabbi Yochanan tells us, no, you can't do it there. Okay. So now we have a fascinating Gemara that highlights what it is that Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish are disagreeing about. And remarkably, it's about whether or not the Mabul of the flood in the times of Noah what actually occurred in Israel. So Amar Mar, Amar Lo.
No, just one question on the last point. Are
Sure,
we
please.
concluding then that there has to be burnt outside Yerushalayim?
Absolutely. Has to be burned outside Jerusalem.
So they
Correct.
take it outside the city itself, not just outside the Beit HaMikdash.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah, it could be a long schlep.
Yeah, well, they're going to go to Har. Well, now, remember, when we say outside the city of Jerusalem, we mean outside, what was the city of Jerusalem, not what we currently think of. And they went to Har Zeitim. So, right? Isn't I think
Har Zeitim is not just outside the walls on the hill.
Exactly, exactly. So I mean, you can see it from your
Right.
from if you're in parts of the old city, you can see it very well. So the bottom line is that that's where they would go. So Amar Mar Amar Lo Rabbi Yochanan. So we're just quoting the language that we had before. But Halo Chol Eretz Yisrael Bedukahi. All of Israel is already checked. But my kamifliki, what exactly are they arguing about when Rabbi Yochanan says that Israel's checked for dead bodies, and Rabbi Yisrael says it's not? Mar sabar yarad ma'abol eretz Yisrael, umar sabar lo yarad. So Reish Lakish thinks that the flood happened in Israel, killing all the inhabitants, and thereby bringing bones and bodies all over the place and making things all thick with mud, etc. And so as a result, you would need to do a detailed checking in order to find all the bodies. And they weren't, and it wasn't, and everywhere wasn't checked completely thoroughly. Now, we don't know that there's any bodies there, so we don't assume that there is, but the bottom line is that we need to be worried about it. And so as a result, when we found the special place for the paraduma where we would burn it, it was a special place so that everything would be okay. Umar Savar Lo Yarad. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan says you didn't need to do any kind of special checking because there was no flood in the land of Israel, and therefore there aren't bodies all over the place, and therefore the checking that we did in a normal way, there was no special checking that was necessary because there weren't bodies all over the place. So that's the story. That's the debate. So Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Ushneim Mikra Echad Darshu, and really both of them are learning this lesson of whether or not there was a flood in Israel, all from the same verse. One interprets it one way so that there is a flood, and one interprets it the other way so it's not a flood. And the pasuk is from Yechezkel. Yechezkel Parakaf Bet, pasuk Kav Dalet. And the pasuk is as follows: Ben Adam. Well, I'll read the whole pasuk. Do we? Oh, actually, the Gemara has the whole pasuk. So Ben Adam, a son of man. This is referring to Yechezkel. At Eretz lo mitoarahi. You are a land that has not been cleansed, that is not tahor. Lo gushma bayom za'am. It's not. She has not been rained upon on the day of fury. So Rabbi Yochanan Savar Atmuhi matmakra. The Rabbi Yochanan understands that the pasuk is asking a question, meaning, uh, uh, are you not cleaned? Are you not the land that was not that did not have meaning? Did the rains Eretz Yisrael milo mitoharaat? Are you not cleansed? Klum yardu alayach geshamim biyom za'am. Did the rains descend upon you on the day of fury? The answer is no. There was no rain, and therefore Rabbi Yochanan says there was no rain in the times of the flood on the land of Israel. The Reish Lakish Savar Kipashte. No, it's a statement. Eretz lo mitorat. You are not a cleansed land. Mi lo yardu alaya geshamim b'yom zam. After all, didn't rains descend upon you in the day of on the day of fury? So that it's basically, do you put the question as part of the first part or as part of the second part? Meaning, do you say when we say at eretz lo matoarahi, is it a rhetorical question? Of course you're not cleansed, or is it a statement? You are or is it a question of course you are cleansed because there was no rain on you. So those are the two different ways to read it. So Esvei Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. So we're now going to have an extended discussion, in fact, multiple versions of this extended discussion between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan, trying to prove whether or not there was rain in the land of Israel at the time of the flood.
Is there
So
the question there that the rains are a cleansing action, or the rains are making are
no, the rains are the dirtying
oh,
action, are the
dirty. Okay,
matame action, and
okay,
the question is, did you need to be cleansed as
right.
a result of those rains? So, Esei Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. So Reish Lakish asked Rabbi Yochanan, Chatzeros Hayub Yerushalayim. There are courtyards in Yerushalayim, Benuyos al Hasela, that are built on bedrock, and this is a Mishnah in Maseches Para. And so, talking about how they go through the process to ensure that the people involved in the process of the para aduma all stay tahor. V'tachtehen chalul, and beneath them there was a carved hollow area. Mibnei kever hatom, because they were worried about deep graves, and so by having a hollow underneath, imagine a cave, and imagine somebody standing above the ground where the cave is. If you are in that ground, if you are above that cave, and there is a dead body buried beneath the cave, the hollow of the cave essentially serves as a roof that stops the tuma from going further up, assuming that the cave is a sufficiently high cave, which is not that high. It only needs to be a few tfachim. So as a result, that's why they would make this hollow underneath, so that so they would know that there is no dead bodies in the space between the roof of the cave and the top surface of the earth. That they knew. But even if there was a dead body beneath the cave, it would be okay. And because you would have the hollow there, and so the hollow would cover you mipnei kever hatom, out of that concern.
Because otherwise, we say the halal goes up to Shemayim.
Otherwise, if you're just have somebody, the kever goes up to Shemaim.
Right.
Otherwise, if you just have a body buried in a grave, then not only does it go up to the surface, but it goes up all the way to heaven. You're
Right,
absolutely right.
right. And so that's a whole machloket about airplanes today. People
Yes,
flying in the
correct.
planes
Now the
and
good news is that one, to me, the airplane itself serves as a closed vessel, so that as a result, the anything within that closed vessel would not actually get any tuma. And indeed, when you have a flight to Israel, for example, they ensure that any bodies that are flying to Israel on that flight, in order to avoid the entire plane becoming a single ohel for everybody to become tameh, they actually make an ohel within the hold of the plane in order to prevent the entire plane from becoming tameh on that basis.
but there
Well,
are still them that hold that if the plane flies over a cemetery, it's a question, it's a shaila. There are
I'm
people that
sure,
hold
I'm
that
sure
way.
that there are, but I'm offering you my suggestion. But in any event, so I'm not, I personally am not worried about it, but of course I'm not a Kohen, so I don't, it's not as applicable to me. But umivi and nashimu baros v'yoldos, and so they bring the pregnant women and there for giving birth. Umegadlot sham b'neihem lepara, and they would raise their children there to deal with the paraduma, so that everybody would be tahor. Umevin shvarim, and they would bring oxen, the algabehen dlasos, and on their backs were doors. So you can imagine an ox with a very wide platform on top of it. V'tinokot yoshvin aleihen, and the children would sit on top of that platform. V'kosot shel even biyadan, and they would use only stone cups, because stone cups don't have the possibility of becoming tameh. Umilu v'yashvu b'mekoman, and then they would ride down to the spring, and they would fill up their cups with the water, and then they would go back to their place, and that's how they would ensure that the water that they got remained tahor. So now that we said this Mishnah, doesn't this show that we need to be worried about graves in the deep of Israel? And the only reason you would need to be worried about that is if, in fact, there was a flood in Israel. And so doesn't that show, Reish Lakish says, that I'm right and you're wrong, Rabbi Yochanan? So Amar Rav Huna, Braid the Rabbi Yoshua, Mala Asu B'Para. No, it's not, in fact, an indication of the fact that there was the flood in Israel, but rather it's an increase, an extra thing that was done with respect to paraduma. As Rashi says, Ma'ale asu b'para, they did something extra, mishum kula de'ikiluba mishum tzedukin. There was a leniency that was done in order to differentiate ourselves from the Tzedukin. The Tzedukin believed that if, in fact, somebody who was Shahayu Omrim, because they would say, B'ma'orve Shemesh Haisa Nases, that if somebody was Tameh and went to the mikveh and was now a Tvul Yom and needed to wait until nightfall to be fully Tahor, only after the nightfall would they be able to be involved with the paraduma. But we, the proper Jews, the Jews who follow the Talmud, say no. Say actually even a Tvul Yom can do it. And as a result, we would intentionally turn the people that were involved in the para aduma process into Tvul Yoms. We would have them touch a sheretz, and then they would go to the mikvah, and then they would do the paraduma ceremony. And so vahayu mitamin es hakohen umadvilin oto. We would make the kohen tameh and then have him go to the mikvah. V'sarfa tvul yom, and we would purposely have the kohen who burned the paraduma be a tvul yom asuba. So as a result,
why? But why?
In order to show that the Tzedukim were wrong, right? The Tzedukim said you had to wait. This person needed to be totally tahor and even tahor, so that after they went to the mikveh, they would need for night to fall. But we say that that is a wrong understanding of the Torah. And so to highlight that that understanding is wrong, we would purposely do it in a way that's kosher for us, but not kosher for them.
No, I understand that logic, but why are we saying that's wrong? Wouldn't it make more sense that the person would be tahor when he?
So I don't remember the psukim, but it's definitely based on the psukim that it says that a tvul yom is still is considered tahor enough in order for them to be able to do it. I'm sorry that I don't have it.
So that's a gezerot katuv?
Yes, absolutely. It's 100%. Directly from the psukim that the rabbis got that a tvul yom is okay. And so as a result of us doing that, asuba malos acherus. So as a result, because we're lenient in one area, so then we are stringent in other areas. because we don't want, if we're just lenient everywhere, then there's a sense of leniency that will flow through everything, and we won't be strict where we should be. Oh, so therefore we're going to be strict elsewhere. But the truth is that if in fact the animal were slaughtered in a place that wasn't checked, lo mifsala, it wouldn't be puzzle. Bahachi, the kol Eretz Yisrael bedukahi, because all of Israel is considered checked. Okay, so so that was Rav Huna's answer, explaining how even Rabbi Yoshua, I'm saying even Rabbi Yochanan, who says that there was no flood in Israel, would still say that you need to be worried about Kever Tahom. So Eisvei Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. Now Reish Lakish is the one that's being challenged by Rabbi Yochanan because we have the following brisa: Pam acha echad matzu atzamos belishkas dir ha'etzim. They one time found bones in the woodshed. In the base of Migdash, uviksha l'gzor tuma al Yerushalayim, and they wanted to say that we had to treat anything that was in Yerushalayim as tameh. Amar Rabbi Yoshua al raglav va'amar. So Rabbi Yoshua got up and said, "Lo busha uchlima hilanu." Is it not a humiliation and a disgrace? Shenigzor tuma al irabosenu. If we were to cause tuma to be declared about our city. So aye mete mabul. Where are the dead of the flood? Aye mete Nebuchadnezzar. Where are the dead that Nebuchadnezzar left behind? Doesn't the fact that we don't find dead from the flood everywhere, and we don't find dead from Nebuchadnezzar everywhere, doesn't that show that in fact we should not make this place tameh, and we should not just go based on the finding of one body and make all of Yerushalayim tameh? And as Rashi puts it, ayeh mate mabul shenimtzaim b'shar mekomos. After all, you find the dead of the flood in other places, v'kan einan nimtzayin, but here we don't find them. And ayeh Nebuchadnezzar shaharag ba v'hufnu kulam, and yet all of the dead that Nebuchadnezzar killed, we cleared out those bodies. The ein echad matziba, so that no one would be left here. Al karchenu bedukahi. So clearly, we see that Yerushalayim has been searched and is not tameh. And doesn't that show that in fact there must not have been a flood? Because if there was a flood, we would not necessarily be able to find all of the dead bodies from the flood. Midika amar hachi lav lamemra delo havu. From the fact that Rabbi Yoshua made this declaration, doesn't that show that there wasn't the flood in Israel? So Reish Lakish responds back in a way that I think you're probably thinking to yourself, Ula tamech. But according to your reasoning, Haruge Nebuchadnezzar, Hakanami Delo Habu, are you the juxtaposition in Rabbi Yoshua's statement is between the dead of the flood and the dead of Nebuchadnezzar. And what does it mean, the dead of the Nebuchadnezzar? Of course, the dead of Nebuchadnezzar were killed in the land of Israel. It was just Elohavu Ufaninu. It happened, and we cleared them away. Hakanami Havu Ufaninu. Here too, it happened. The flood happened, and we cleared away as best as we can. But we cleared it away, and so that's what he is saying. He's not saying that there wasn't a flood.
To what is when Rashi says that we found them elsewhere. Where were the elsewhere? Bashar Mekomod.
And we're going to see that they're found in Bavel. We're going to talk about that very shortly, but that's what he's hinting to. So the ipanu, but 1 second. If they in fact cleared them away, and you, Reish Lakish, agree that they cleared them away, so then ha'ipane, they were cleared away. Meaning, why are you telling us that you need to choose a specific location to burn the para aduma because of the concern of kever tahom, of a deep grave, everything was cleared away. You just said that it was all cleared away. Or Rabbi Yoshua just said, and of course you're going to agree with Rabbi Yoshua. So Nihid Ipanim Yerushalayim. Yeah, no. The point was is they were cleared out of Yerushalayim. Mikula Eretz Yisrael,
So,
Lo Ipane. But from all of Eretz Yisrael, they weren't cleared. And where are we burning this paraduma? Outside
outside Jerusalem.
Yerushalayim. And so as a result, since we're burning it outside Yerushalayim was not the place that was checked according to Reish Lakish, and therefore we had a specific place that was checked, and therefore everything is fine. So
But then didn't we said all of Eretz Israel was Baduk? Didn't that we
that's
just
what Rabbi Yochanan says. That's not what Reish Lakish says. That's precisely the disagreement. And that disagreement is all based on whether or not we say there was a flood. According to Reish Lakish, there was no flood in Eretz Yisrael, and so according to Reish Lakish, there was a flood in Eretz Yisrael, and therefore you needed to either remove everything, as was happened in Yerushalayim, or you needed to check a particular place, and that's what they did in connection with the place where they burned the paraduma. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, there was no flood, and all of Israel is checked, and therefore what matters is not the fact that this place was checked, but whether or not you're opposite the opening of of the Beis Hamikdash. Are you slaughtering it in the place that is opposite the opening of the Beis Hamikdash? So, Ika Damri, there is another way to have had this conversation that maybe that might have happened, that some people say is the way it happened. Esve Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan, that Reish Lakish was acting Rabbi Yochanan from what Rabbi Yoshua said. Aye mete mabu aye mete Nebuchadnezzar, my lab medahani havu, hani nami havu. Well, obviously, everybody agrees that the people that Nebuchadnezzar, when he destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, he killed people, and those dead people were in Israel and in Yerushalayim. So doesn't that show that just that and this statement by Rabbi Yoshua compares the dead of Nebuchadnezzar to the dead of the flood? So just as the dead of Nebuchadnezzar were in the land of Israel, so too the flood caused the people who were dead to be in their land of Israel. So Midi area, Hagadisa of Hagadisa. Rabbi Yochanan responds, nah, it doesn't mean anything. This could be in this case, and this could be in that case, meaning that when it comes to the dead of the flood, they never existed in Eretz Yisrael. And when it comes to the dead of Nebuchadnezzar, yeah, they existed, but they were cleaned out. Each one could be its own answer. So Esvei Mikol Asher B'cha Rabu Mesu. But when second Reish Lakish says back to Rabbi Yochanan, how about the fact that it says that everything that was on dry land died? So Bishlam Aladidi, according to me, everything makes sense. Da'amina Yarad Mabul Eretz Yisrael Mishum Hachi Mesu. That the flood happened in Israel, and so that's why everything on dry land, including in Israel, all died. Why did everything die? Why not didn't whoever was in the land of Israel survive the flood? Mishum Havla. So Rabbi Yochanan explained that it was because of the Havla. And as Rashi says, top line on Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Bet, Mehavla Mesu Ukvarum. And they were that they all died from the Hevel, from the air, namely that the air all became heated, as we will see in a moment. Ukvarum, and they were then buried. Habaim acharehem, by the people who came after them. Bebate kvarot, in regular graves. Ve'ein lachosh, and therefore, because they didn't have a flood that moved their bodies all around, but rather died due to the air, the nature of the air, we don't have to worry for the whole haaretz, for the whole land. El l'shar artzos, only outside the land of Israel do we have to have this concern. Shahaya sham mabul v'nishka ubatit, and whereas elsewhere we do have to worry about bodies being buried anywhere because the flood was there, the water caused all this mud to come up, and so as a result, it all got buried in that mud. And so as a result, you wouldn't necessarily have found all the bodies because they weren't just lying out. as they would be if they died as a result of steam, essentially, that was in the air. So, Mishkida Rav Chisda, and their death is consistent with what Rav Chisda said. To Amar Rav Chisda, Veroschen kilkalu uveroschen nidonu, that they messed up, the people of the generation of the flood messed up with boiling substance, namely semen, and so as a result, they were going to be punished with the boiling substance, namely the boiling flood waters. Because when it came to the end of the flood, it said that the flood's waters subsided. And that same phraseology is also used to show that heated anger also got calmed down. Uksiv hasam v'chamas hamelech shuchacha. When it comes to Megillus Esther and the king's anger at Haman, it also got calmed down. And so as a result, that shows just as the anger cooled, so too the waters cooled. So Ika de Amre, when there are, so that's a second way of having this conversation. And there's another way to have the conversation. Esvi Rabbi Yochanan l'Reish Lakish, that Rabbi Yochanan asked Reish Lakish, Mikol asher b'charavu mesu. 1 second, I thought that everything that was on dry land died. So Bishlam l'didi, that it makes sense according to me. De Amina lo yarad mabul eretz Yisrael, because I'm the one who says that the flood didn't go into the land of Israel. Mishum hachi havi charava. That's why it specifically says that they died on dry land. If there was a flood in Eretz Yisrael, they would have died in the flood, not on dry land. El didach ma'ika rabba. What does it mean by on dry land? No, of course, it's a simple explanation. Reish Lakish explains. Charaba shahaisa mikara. It was dry land. It then got rained on. So avamai kari la charaba. So why does it call it charaba? After all, it got rained on. Kid Rav Chisda. It's to highlight Rav Chisda's teaching. To Amar Rav Chisda. Bedora mabel lo nigzera gzeira al dagim shabayam. That when it came to the fish of the sea, they did not have a decree upon them. Shene'amar mikol asher b'charava mesu below dagim shabayam. But so even though there was boiling water, it was a miracle that the fish didn't die, and the fish didn't die, and that was why it says b'charava. So bishlam alaman de amar lo yarad mabul eretz Yisrael hainu dekam rema hasam. But 1 second, according to Rabbi Yochanan, we can understand how there was a re'im that could survive the flood because the re'im was in the land of Israel, and there wasn't a flood there. El Laman de Amar Yarad, Rema Heichakam. Where was the Re'im? And the reason that the Re'im is such a problem is because it's humongous. So Amar Rabbi Yanai, Guriot Hechnisu B'Teva. They brought baby rams, baby Re'ims into the ark. And by the way, Tozos asks and answers, 1 second, what about the Hevel? What about the air quality and the heated air that killed all the other things? So a re'im would not have been killed by it because it's a much stronger and larger animal. But anyway, v'ha'amar Rabba bar Barchana lididi chazili urzila de remas bas yoma. That you want to say that it was a baby re'im that went into the ark. That doesn't work, because Rabba Bar Chama said he saw a re'im that was 1 day old, v'havi kahar Tabor, and it was as big as Mount Tabor. V'har Tabor kama havya, and how big was Har Tabor? Arba'im parsi, 40 parsaot large. Mashka de Tzavarei Tulasa parsi, and its neck alone was 3 parsas. Marbata Deresha Parsa Ufalga, and the place that it would put its head alone was a parsa and a half. So Rama Kava V'Sachar Rama Kava V'Sachar Yardana, and then it even though it was 1 day old, when it pooped, it jammed up the entire Yarden. So as a result, it can't be that even the baby re'im was brought into the ark. So I'm a Rabbi Yochanan, and it's interesting that it's Rabbi Yochanan. We'll come back to that because, of course, Rabbi Yochanan can say, as we saw a few moments ago, that the Re'im was in the land of Israel. But he's answering now essentially on behalf of Reish Lakish. Rosho hichnisu l'teva. Its head was in the ark. V'hamar mar bata deresha parzu falga. But second, even the head is a parsa and a half. That's too big. Ella rosh chotmo hichnisu l'teva. No, the tip of its nose it put into the ark. And so as a result, as Rashi tells us, that it was able to breathe that way. V'ha'amar Rabbi Yochanan lo yarad mabo la'eretz Yisrael. But second, why is Rabbi Yochanan answering? Isn't he the one who said that the flood didn't go into the land of Israel? And so that's why, so the Re'im could be there. Why was he saying that the Re'im stuck its nose? L'divrei Reish Lakish kamar. He was answering for Reish Lakish. V'ha'kasagya teva. But one second, how could it stay that way? After all, the ark would go wherever the waters would flow. And so, I didn't mean to be a poet there, but in any event, so Amar Reish Lakish, so Reish Lakish explained, no, Karnav Kashru B'Teva, the horns of the Re'im were tied to the ark, so that way the tip of the nose would stay in the ark and be able to breathe. V'Hamar Rav Chisda, Anshe Dora Mabo Barosin Kilkalu Barosin Nidonu. But one second, Rav Chisda said that the water was boiling. So wouldn't the water boiling kill the Re'im? Utamech. But one second, according to that reasoning, Teva Hechisagya. How did the Teva itself survive if it was boiling water? Even that waterproofing pitch would have melted off. Og Melech HaBashan Hecha Hakai. How did Og hold on to the ark and survive? Rather, it was all a miracle. It cooled off the sides of the ark. Now, once you say that, actually, you don't even need to say that the nose of the Re'im was any longer in the ark, because after all, it was not actually super hot. And however Og survived and breathed outside the ark, the Re'im could have. But in any event, maybe it's because they want the ark to have facilitated the survival of all animals that they don't actually go in that direction, and they leave it as the Re'im still had its tip of its nose in the ark. Well,
I don't know, how could they not be drowned? Weren't they, the people were inside the ark, so they wouldn't be drowned, right? Weren't they protected from the waters? If these
Yes.
people, if only the nose of this beast sticks inside, the rest of his body's outside. I mean, isn't he
Yes.
subjected to drowning? The same thing
Well,
with
that's
Og.
no. The point is that the nose was inside, and so as a result, and of course, two things. One is the top of the ark never went underwater. So the top of the ark, it might have been raining, but we all survive rain. I mean, we all stand
Right.
in the rain and we can still breathe. So as long as the water, and they were holding on to the ark, so the ark floated them to the top, and they were still able to breathe. And in particular, the Re'im was breathing the air that was inside the ark, and so as a result, that's how it was able to survive.
But he was on the deck. This beast was on the deck, right?
Well, it's bigger than the deck. Remember that it's
So,
way
so he
bigger
was
than.
hanging out. He was in the water itself.
Correct, correct. And that's why we're asking the question, how could it survive the boiling hot water? And the answer is that Hashem made a miracle that made the water that was immediately surrounding the ark cooler, so that it wouldn't burn the ark itself, and as a result, not only would it not burn the ark itself, it would not kill the Re'im, and it would not kill Og Melech HaBashan. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish nehi nami di yared mabul le'eretz Yisrael. So one second, fine. You want to tell me that according to Reish Lakish, it rained in the land of Israel. V'halo pash. But one second, wouldn't there not have been any bodies remaining? Da'amar Reish Lakish, because Reish Lakish himself says, Lama Nikrashma Mitsula. Why is the place called Mitsula? Meaning, why is Bavel called Mitsula, which means deep? Shekol Mesei Mabul Nitztalalu Sham. It's because all the dead of the flood sank there. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Lama Nikrashma Shinar. Why is Bavel called Shinar? Shekol Mesei Mabul Nigaru Sham. Nin Arusham, excuse me, Nin Arusham, because all of the blood of dead of the flood were dumped there. So bottom line is, it seems like it's all there. So EF Shar de lo idabku. No, the bottom line is that when we say all, he doesn't necessarily, Rish Lakish doesn't literally mean all. He means, of course, there were some that got stuck in the land of Israel. So I'm Rabbi Abau, Lama Nikra Shma Shinar. It's just another reason of why Bavel is called Shinar. Shemina Eret Ashirit, because it Ashireha, because it shakes out those that are wealthy. But once again, though, we see that there are wealthy people in Bavel. Tlasa dare lo mashchi. No, it doesn't stay around for 3 generations. Rabbi Ami kol ha'ochel mi'afara shel Bavel ki'ilu okel basar abosab. Anybody who eats from the dust of Bavel, it's as if they're eating their ancestors, because the flood waters brought those ancestors to the land. Tanya Nami Hokim, we have a brisa similarly. Kol ha'ochel mi'afara shel Bavel ki'ilu okel basar abosab. It's as if you, if some people say it's not as if you eat your ancestors, but if you ate vermin and creepy crawly creatures. Seir
Are
Amishtaleach.
they still living, those creepy crawly
No,
creatures?
no, dead ones, dead ones.
Before you go,
Seir,
question.
yes.
Practically, since this was all written, Eretz Israel has been invaded over and over and over again. And some of those invasions resulted in massive amounts of death, such as the Crusaders. Don't we have to worry about this even today?
So I would argue the following. The key element of the flood is not the fact that it killed a lot of people. The key, because even the flood in Eretz Yisrael, even according to Rabbi Yochanan, killed everybody who was living there. The key element is whether or not the bodies were effectively pushed into the mud. And so that's the basis of the concern. Now, one can still argue that we don't know where all the graves are, because not necessarily all the graves were marked, because some people might have been buried by people who weren't Jewish. So maybe there is some element of concern that we would need. And I presume, there is this idea that Eliyahu comes and marks all the graves. So it could be that's what that is capturing, is that something along those lines would still be necessary. But so I think you're asking a good question. I don't think it's completely comparable to the flood, but I do think that it's a fair question that we would need to resolve, God willing, when the Beis Hamikdash gets rebuilt.
Thank you.
So finally, we'll just conclude very quickly. Seir Mishtaleach. We talked about the fact that if you have the he-goat that is sent to Azazel, you're not liable for burning it outside the Beis Hamikdash. Uraminhu, but 1 second. O Korban. We have a brisa. We have a brisa that says the following: if you have an offering, and this brisa is in the context of talking about when something offered outside the Beis Hamikdash will result in liability. So when maybe you might think, oh, korban, when it comes to the word korban, shomeani afilu kache bedek, maybe even if you were to sacrifice something, an animal that was only dedicated as property for the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash, that it also would result in liability for sacrificing it outside the Beis Hamikdash. Shenikru korban, because it too is called a korban. Shenemar vinakrev as korban Hashem, because it says we've brought an offering for Hashem. This is in Bamidbar Perek Lamed Aleph Pasuk Nun, and so as a result, this is from after their victorious battle with Midian, and the what they offered were clearly things that were valuable and not sacrifices. And yet they were called a korban. So maybe you would think that an animal that was dedicated for that purpose would also, and now is slaughtered outside of the Yerushalayim, of the Beis Hamikdash, would also be considered a slaughtered outside of the temple animal, and therefore be like a sacrifice in the wrong place and be subject to the punishment of kares. Talmud Lomar, Vel Pesach Oel Moed Lo Heviu. No, the key is that the Torah also says that it has to be to the entrance of the tent of meeting. He did not bring it. Meaning, Misharoi Lavol Ohel Moed. It has to be something that would be fit to go to the Ohel Moed. And an animal that is not that is dedicated to the temple upkeep, which needs to be, according to the Torah, only an animal that has a mum in it that would not be fit for sacrifice in the first place. So as a result, that's going to not be a problem. And so as a result, this animal is not going to be prohibited to slaughter outside of the Beis Hamikdash. Yatsu kadshe bedakabayit she'ein and ru'yin. So as a result, that comes to exclude the things that are dedicated for the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash. Otzias elu. So 1 second, she'enam ru'uyin. So I figure out that therefore I'm supposed to exclude these things that are not fit. Velo otzi es seir hamishtalech. But I'm not going to exclude the he-goat that's sent away. Shehu roi lavo el pesach olamid. Because after all, it does come to the Ohel Moed. When you do the lottery, that lottery is right there in front of the opening of the Beis Hamikdash. So Talmud of the Heichal, Talmud Lomar LaHashem. So that's why it says LaHashem Lotzi Seir Hamishtalech She'eno Miyuchad LaHashem. So the word LaHashem comes to exclude the Seir LaAzazel. But 1 second. We said in our Mishnah that the reason that the Seir L'Azazel is not covered by the prohibition to slaughter it outside the outside the Beis Hamikdash is because it's of the language of El Pesach Ol Moed Lo Heviu, and now you're telling me that it's not El Pesach Ol Moed Lo Heviu, but rather La Hashem that teaches us this concept. So Lo Kashya Kan Kodem Hagrala. Kan la'achar hagrala. No, one time is before you did the lot and figured out which one was la'azazel and which one was la'Hashem, and one was after. So before you did the lot, well then, of course, it's still fit to go to Hashem. Maybe it'll even be chosen to be la'Hashem. But 1 second, achar hagrala nami ha'ikavidui. But even after the gorel, it stays there as the Seir L'Azazel stays in the courtyard because you do vidui over it. So Ela Amar Ravmani Lo Kasha Kan Kodem Vidui Kan La'achar Vidui. So no, the discussion is when we say in our Mishnah that it's based on El Pesach Ol Moed Lo Viyu, that is after you did the vidui on it, because now that you did the vidui on it, it's supposed to be outside the Beis Hamikdash, and it's not supposed to go to El Pesach Ol Moed. But we learn from the Hashem that even the Seir L'Azazel, either before it did the Gorel or even after the Gorel, but before the Vidui, it still is going to be prohibited. It's not going to have the prohibition of slaughtering it outside. If you were to take it outside in the middle of the Yom Kippur service, can't imagine how that would happen. But if somebody were to grab it, take it outside the Beis Hamikdash, and offer it as a sacrifice on an altar outside the Beis Hamikdash, would that person be subject to kares? The answer is no, because because that animal is not La Hashem. And so as a result, therefore, you're not going to be liable if one were to do that. We will pick up from the bottom line of Kuf Yud Gimel and discuss the next case of the Mishnah, talking about animals that were sodomized or had relations with a human being, and that in fact, those two, if you were to offer them as sacrifices outside the Beis Hamikdash, will not trigger the prohibition, the punishment of kares, but we'll get to that, God willing, tomorrow.
So the Sar Mishtaleach that is not ru'ui for the Beit Hamikdash, but Mizbeach?
Correct. It's not. It doesn't. The Sar Mishtaleach goes out and is thrown off the cliff. As the rabbis explained.
Correct.
And so as a result, it certainly is not a korban, and therefore if you were to slaughter it and offer it as a korban outside the Beis Hamikdash, you are not in fact slaughtering something that was supposed to go to Hashem, and therefore you're not subject to the prohibition of kares.
Uh-huh.
That's the call.
Have a wonderful day. Look forward to continuing our learning together. It's a full daf with wonderful the stories and lessons for us in connection with the flood. Looking forward to continuing our
So
learning
we don't
together.
know if the flood actually entered Yerushalayim or
So it's the
Israel.
debate between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Now we usually paskin like Rabbi Yochanan, and so if we were to use that on that basis, it would mean that the flood did not happen in Israel,
Where did it happen then?
everywhere else in the world.
So presumably those people, if so, those people were living in Israel at the time, wherever the land of Israel was, would not have been affected by the flood at all.
They would have died from the heat that was associated with
Uh-huh.
the flood.
I see. The heat that disseminated from
Exactly, exactly. And
in
so
the air.
everybody did die. The only survivors are Noah, etc. But the heat, but they wouldn't have been, the mud and the muck wouldn't have been brought up, and thereby causing dead bodies to be put in places that we never would have found.
Mhm.
All right. Have a wonderful day. Looking forward to continuing our learning together.